Hi guys, this is Rude History. I'm Claire, and Erica is not currently with me, but you will hear her on this recording. So this is part of our 3-part series on 9/11. If you haven't already listened to the other parts, you need to go back, otherwise this will not make any sense. Alright, thanks for listening.
Alright, so I think that's the first time anyone's had technical difficulties because the cat was too close to the microphone. Probably not the first time. I mean, podcasters tend to be nerds who like cats, but you know.
Oh my God.
Whatever. Okay. When we left off, we were talking about Flight 11. The flight attendant with the last name Sweeney, she mentioned what looked like a bomb. Both flight attendants mentioned that Coach thought that they were just having a medical emergency. Okay, so at 8:43, Flight 11 adjusted to head straight for Lower Manhattan. And at this point, Betty Ong stops talking. I think the call was still open, but she wasn't saying anything. Miss Sweeney, however, was still on the line, and she was describing what she saw. And the last words on her call were, "Oh my God, we are way too low." And then it went to static.
Oh.
So 8:43 is when Betty stops talking. 8:46:25. Flight 11 hits the 96th floor of the North Tower at 440 miles per hour.
Jeez.
More than 6 minutes later, fighter jets finally took off looking for Flight 11.
Oh.
And I would just like to point out that this is not the fault of the military. They have never been given the information that they need to be given. It's really...
Right, they should have been contacted from the beginning.
Yeah. I'm not going to go through everything with the other flights because honestly it's very much the same thing. Like in most cases the flight the caps caught one or two of them, flagged one or two of the terrorists. They're not actually legitimately really searched. It means nothing. It's just security theater. And they follow the same script. They had a plan and they executed it on the first 3 flights where they get seats up at the front of the plane and they have aisle access in those seats. And so the first thing they do is they hustle their pilot into the cockpit. They kill the people who are in there. And then, you know, the people who are not in the cockpit are basically guarding it and keeping anyone from coming in. But it does not sound like on the other 2 flights that anyone, on the first 3 flights, that anyone tried to rush the cockpit because, again, Mace is in the air and they're all terrified. They have no idea what's going to happen.
Right.
The second flight was United Flight 175. It was, again, a nonstop to LA. It takes off at 8:14, so a little bit later, but not significantly. And at one point, the pilots from 175 were actually asked to look for Flight 11. They were like, we don't have eyes on them. We don't know where they are. There are 56 people on 11 and 56 passengers, 9 crew. So it's really not full. This is one of the flights where a lot of the passengers in particular were calling. There was one family. It was Peter Hansen and his wife and little girl. She was like a toddler. She was very small. And he calls his parents, and he called his parents at 8:52 that morning. So what was that? Around...
They would have been lower by then, right?
At 8:52? Yeah, they would have been lower, but I think I think it was an airphone.
Oh, it was an airphone.
It was an airphone. Most of the time, it's an airphone. They're not a whole lot of people. If they're on a cell phone, it's usually because
it's lower. Yeah, because once you hit cruising altitude, you can't use your cell phone. There's no connection up there.
Yeah, the unfortunate part is that some of these planes are going to get low enough where people can literally call on their cell phones. Yeah, Peter Hansen calls his parents and he says the cockpit is occupied by terrorists. The plane is flying really weird. There's an attendant down, possibly another person's dead. Passengers are at the back of the plane. Please call the airline. And they did. They called United, but they got a busy signal like every time they called, so they had to have the local police do it.
Wow.
While 175 is in the air, CNN reported the first crash at 8:49. They had live footage. They actually interviewed a witness who was like across the street in a meeting in another building, and he'd seen that it was a jet and that there wasn't anything wrong with it. And there were some early reports that it was a small plane like a Cessna, but CNN did not report that. So there's so much misinformation that's going around like here. People are trying to make decisions that they really can't make because they don't have enough information, the military in particular. But this just tells you, I think, everything you need to know about the FAA and where its head is on this day. Okay, so at around 8:55, the New York FAA Control Center tries to inform its superiors, and I think they're actually in Virginia, tries to tell them that 175 has been taken, that they know it's hijacked. They won't take the message.
What?
They won't. They are in a meeting because they think Flight 11 is still out there.
Wow.
Yeah, because that, like I was saying, there's so much misinformation. They know that the World Trade Center is on fire. They know that a plane hit it. They're not sure it was Flight 11.
Oh, wow.
So they won't talk to the people who are trying to tell them that another flight has been taken because they're already in a meeting about a plane that no longer exists.
Oh my goodness.
But they don't know that. Yeah, the guy who was flying the plane, Marwan al-Shahi, he did not, like, and this is something that was present with all of the fake pilots. They did not care. 175 actually almost took out another plane on the way. They're like flying on collision courses.
Wow.
Yeah, like they honestly, they're not super good at this and they don't care. They're like, get out or I guess we're gonna crash. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So at 9 o'clock, Peter Hansen calls his parents back. He says they have knives, they have mace, and what looks like a bomb. Okay, so that's the second one. He says that they're flying erratically. He doesn't think it's the pilots. And he actually says, and this is a quote, I think they intend to go to Chicago or someplace and fly into a building.
Wow.
So he picked up on this fast. And then he says the worst thing, and this is so sad because so many people say similar things to this. He says, don't worry, Dad, if it happens, it will be very fast.
Oh.
I cried a lot reading this book. It was so bad.
Terrible. Wow.
It was so bad. Yeah. So at 9:01, the plane goes into a rapid descent. And at 9:03:11, 175 goes into the second tower between the 75th and the 85th floors at an angle. And it's going between 540 and 587 miles per hour. So, yeah. That, and I think we said this earlier, that happened live on Good Morning America.
Right.
They caught it. So people saw that.
Yeah.
You saw that.
I mean, we saw the footage replayed.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Oh, God. Yeah, we did. The third plane was American Airlines Flight 77. This was a Boeing 757, so it's a slightly smaller plane, but it's still big enough. This was Dulles to LA, and the terrorists on this one were all Saudi.
Dulles.
Yep, Dulles.
Wow.
Yep.
Dulles. Dulles is now one of the most locked down airports you can go to.
This is why. Yeah. So
they don't play at Dulles.
Well, this is why, because these folks got past them, and that's not a judgment on my part with the security screenings that they had in place at the time.
That was their protocol.
That was their protocol. Yeah, that's not a judgment on anyone who was there that day.
Wow.
Okay, so 77 was in the air by 8:20, and at this point, 175 so 77 takes off at 8:20. 175 has been in flight for 6 minutes, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong. 11, however, is no longer in contact. Okay, but what I want to stress here is that these planes are these takeoffs are very close together. They're only like 21 minutes apart.
Right.
And that's important. And this is why the first three attacks succeed and the last one doesn't. So the first half hour is normal, but it's the same thing. They turn the transponder off. They won't contact them. But this is where there's a real difference, and it's a real problem. Okay, so the FAA has regional centers. So as you pass through, so you start off with one regional center, and then you leave its territory, and you're passed on to another.
Okay.
And they're very balkanized at this point.
Okay.
So all of these Other centers have been on the East Coast, like Boston, New York, blah, blah, blah. They get passed to Indy Center because everything's fine for the first half hour. So they get to the Midwest, or, the edge of the Midwest territory. These people have no idea what's going on. I don't think that they even knew that any hijacking had happened that day. So they're reacting in a totally different way. The FAA controller who's in charge at Indy, when Flight 77 goes silent, he assumes it's a mechanical failure, and he thinks that the plane has crashed.
Oh.
Because it goes off. The thing is, like, it doesn't stay on his radar, so he thinks it's down.
Oh.
When the transponder goes off, he doesn't actually see it on his radar either, so he thinks it's gone. Because that's the most logical explanation if you don't know that there have been several hijackings that morning.
Right.
And the reason it's not on his radar isn't that it's crashed, it's because it turned around and went back.
Oh.
So it's no longer in his territory. That's why he's not seeing it.
Oh.
But he has no clue about the other crashes. He thinks that the plane has just gone down because of mechanical failure. He does his job. He calls the West Virginia State Cops, Air Force Search and Rescue, and the FAA Great Lakes Regional Office, because that's what he's supposed to do.
Okay.
But the thing is, the FAA, God bless, the FAA had been doing a conference call between the Boston, New York, and Cleveland offices about the hijacks. They purposely excluded Indianapolis because it wasn't involved and they needed to do their jobs.
I mean, in hindsight, so much of this is like, duh. But like,
at the time,
I find it hard to judge them. They're the experts and they're working with this,
and
I don't think anybody's taking this, lightly or anything. I just think
none of this is ill will.
Yeah, it's just that their protocol was set by things that had happened before, and this has never happened before.
Their protocol was set in a certain way, but also they've got a certain institutional mindset that is guiding them in a certain way, and you can criticize it because, for example, bombing is going to be the next big thing.
Right.
Oh wait, we've had 3 bombings and 64 hijackings.
I mean, a lot of security protocol is predicated upon the idea of this has happened before.
Yeah.
There is a lack of imagination there.
Yeah. No.
It's gotten a bit better. Like, people are a little bit more about well, this could happen this way. Well, and they try to prevent that, but you can't predict everything.
Well, and also a big problem is that no one is treating the FAA like a big boy and letting it, have any real control over security issues.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently the State Department at this point had a list of 60,000 names of people that it had flagged.
Mm-hmm.
The FAA had a similar list. Guess how long it was?
How long?
12 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, actually...
Yes, well, we know that agencies do not talk to each other. That is not,
oh my God, don't
without
get me started.
actual mounds of paperwork and accountability, which in a way is good, but...
Yeah.
And that brings us to why they made the Department of Homeland Security.
Yep. I mean, honestly, the more I read about this, the more I understand why they did it.
The problem is that because the Department of that whole thing, the Department of Homeland Security combined 22 different agencies. 22 under one single agency. Jesus. And that includes basically anything having to do with immigration, transportation, border, anything that you can imagine, they basically put together. And the problem with that is that when agencies share information, they have to track it, and they have to say, okay, this is from the originating agency. This is who owns this information.
Yeah.
This is who classifies this information. They are in charge of that information. And if the agency that borrowed that information wants to disseminate that to another agency, they have to get permission from the parent agency of that information, Well, when you are under one single parent agency, you don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. So now ICE can communicate with whoever, the transportation, Coast Guard, Secret Service. It's all under Department of Homeland Security. Yeah. So the accountability is gone.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah. That's the problem. And so from one way you can see it, that act was reactionary, and they were like, oh my god, we have to do something, we have to stop these terrorists, we have to know who's coming in, we have to be able to act quickly. And so on one hand you could understand that, but on another hand they removed accountability for 22 agencies.
No, I mean the thing is, like, it always should have been FBI, CIA, ATF, start playing together, stop it. Well, because, like, in the Looming Tower, it even talks about, and of course we'll talk about this more specifically in that episode, but basically, like, the CIA in the 1990s got to the point where it wanted information for information's sake. Right. And it was not sharing it with anybody, because basically the whole idea was, well, if we give this to the FBI, they're going to act on it, and then we can't act on it.
Right.
And it becomes useless.
Yes.
And it's like,
that is a mess.
That's not okay, guys.
That is a mess. But the answer is not putting everybody under one single parent agency that controls everything.
You're right.
I mean, this coming from the party of small government.
Yeah. No, I completely understand.
22 agencies.
I completely understand why they did it, but you're right. It's not an appropriate solution.
Right. Yeah. It's an overreach, a vast overreach.
Yeah. No, you're completely right. Yeah. All right, at 9:08, Indy calls all those places. Well, this entire time, they've been looking in the wrong direction, as we said earlier. That's why they're not seeing them. That's why they think they're down. They're not there anymore.
Right, they've
gone back. Well, the thing is, like, at 9:08, they say it's crashed. We need to get all these people out here. Around 8:51, the hijacking took place.
This is the hijacking of the third plane.
Yes, of 77. Okay. And flight attendant Renee May got a hold of her parents and gave them 3 numbers to call about the hijack. And it's the same runaround with like 10 different people, except this time one of them is the wife of a passenger. So she gets to hear, she's like, oh yeah, 77's been taken over. Oh wait, that's the flight my husband's on.
Yikes.
Yeah. At 9:20, Indy finally learns of the other hijacks and realized that 77 might be one. 77 flew undetected for 36 full minutes.
Wow.
At 9:32, Dulles Airport sees something going 500 miles per hour on the radar. They originally thought it was a fighter jet. That's how fast it was going.
Wow.
They realize it's a hijacked plane, and they think it's going for the White House. Dulles warns Reagan and FAA control, no one says boo to the military.
What?
At 9:36, Boston FAA... They had like a liaison military officer there, and he finally tells the military that 77 is 6 miles from the White House. They try to send jets, but they are 150 miles away.
Right.
Because they had been raised earlier, but they weren't given specific instructions, so they just defaulted to an old Cold War plan where they went to the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh.
Whoops. Okay. 77 makes a 330 degree turn and is now headed towards the Pentagon at 530 miles per hour. It flew really close to the ground. It was like practically on the ground. It hit a portable generator with its right wing and set off a small explosion. And it also tore up the fence around that generator.
Right.
At 9:37:46, it hit the west wall of the Pentagon right below the second floor. The death toll immediately was 53 passengers, 6 crew, and 5 terrorists.
Jeez.
And we're not going to cover the Pentagon too much. Suffice it to say, 125 people on the ground were killed.
Oh my god.
And
people don't really talk about that much.
No. Because it was awful. It was awful.
But it was a much smaller scale than what happened in New York.
If it had been the only thing that happened that day, we never would have stopped talking about it. But because it was just such a lower number of people, that's why. And also because the Pentagon is a huge building, and I think that was part of the whole screw you Bin Laden afterwards. Literally Rumsfeld
did very little damage to the Pentagon.
Literally Rumsfeld was just like, we're going to be open tomorrow. We're going to be working.
Right.
And they were.
Right.
Because they could. Because it basically what happened, and I'm not super great with, I read this. So I'm like trying to construct an image in my mind, and it's hard for me.
Well, I've seen the pictures. Conspiracy theorists basically were arguing that it was a much smaller aircraft because of the small amount of damage, and it was like,
but the thing is, they had just done renovations to reinforce everything.
Right.
So that was actually part of the problem. Like, it was a good thing and a bad thing, because at the World Trade Center, the windows are going to shatter, and they kill a lot of people. But, well, I don't know if they killed a lot of people on the ground, but I assume they did in the, yeah. But they had, for instance, replaced, because of Oklahoma City, when the Murrah building blew up, what killed most people was the glass in the windows. Wow. And so they put all this shatterproof glass in the Pentagon. Because, of course, it was built in the 1940s during World War II. So it's a really old building comparatively. Different codes, all that stuff. So they're updating it. They're trying to make it stronger. The shatterproof glass was a good thing and a bad thing, because it a lot of people were not hurt by the flying glass. But there were people who were trying to get out, and they couldn't get the windows to break. So there's one room. It was these people were having a conference that day, and they literally had a bunch of people have to get up and beat on the window, and the window wouldn't break. They literally shoved it out of the frame about a foot. Yeah. And then they jumped.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why so many more people were able to get out, because they could jump. It was like the second or third floor.
Right.
A couple of people broke legs, obviously, but others were actually caught by the big burly arms of military officers, which you got to admit,
it's kind of amazing.
If you're going to have a day that terrible, it should end with you leaping into the big
to
burly
the arms
arms
of big, strong military men.
But also another reason, I don't think that I'm not sure that all the people were in there that day, because it had just been renovated, so it may have, some people may not have been there. I'm not entirely sure, don't quote me on that, but basically, like, it was a much reinforced building.
Right. It was, somewhat fortunate timing, as fortunate as you can be in this kind of,
The only thing that would have been better, Marcus Zuckoff says, is one wedge over, because it's 5 concentric wings. So, they measure in wedges, like one side of the building, and they're like, one wedge over, no one was in there because they were renovating it. If they just crashed into there, that would have been great.
Nothing would have happened.
Yeah.
That would have been nice.
125 people died, but it was pretty amazing, because Arlington Fire Department was there pretty much immediately, like within 4 minutes, and they fought that fire for 36 hours, nonstop, with reinforcements, and they went in, they rescued people. But it was also amazing because a lot of civilians went in, and they're military people. Like, some of them, like one guy was actually like a combat medic. He was like, my time to shine. So
right, yeah, it's definitely a place that's going to have a lot of backup.
Yeah,
if it does get attacked.
Yeah.
Actually, I know people that were working in DC when it hit, and they told me that it sounded like a bomb going off.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And people were terrified. And there was this one guy who worked, like, in one of the buildings, and he ran home. Like, because you couldn't really get out of the city because everyone was trying to get out at the same time. You couldn't really drive, so he just literally ran home. I think he lived in Alexandria or something.
Holy
somewhere
shit.
Somewhere close by, but not that far.
Yeah,
and he literally ran home.
Yeah, no,
because he was terrified.
Fear will do. Actually, the unthinkable. The unthinkable is about that.
Yeah,
because some of it's like, well, why did people do that? And it's the body has a very specific reaction to stress.
Well, it's like if you look at the video, from 9/11 of the people in New York, they run and they don't know what they're running from.
Yeah.
Like, there were people running who were nowhere near the area. They just run.
That's not surprising, though, because they're like, it's something like an unexplained noise, 90 decibels or louder. We just have an automatic reaction to it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's very animal.
Yeah, like our fear system is completely animal. We'll get to that. It's fascinating. United Airlines Flight 93. The only slightly not happy, but these people were amazing. They were brave. Not that the other victims were not brave, but these people, they had a massive advantage over the first 3 flights. Okay. And that was that their flight was badly delayed. Oh. Badly delayed. It was scheduled for 8 o'clock. It took off at 8:42.
Wow.
So, and the sad part is, if it had just taken off a little bit later, if it had just been delayed a little bit longer, it would have been grounded. in the group stop. Yeah. But yeah, like the Marcus Zuckoff makes a really good point. He's like, this was all about timing. The first 3 attacks worked because they were close enough together that the people on board, there was no way for them to really know what was coming. They all had the same idea that a hijacking is just a hostage situation. They don't want to kill you. They want their money or their political point or whatever it is. But with 93, it is different. They have more information and they're able to act on it. And it's really inspiring. I hope I would be that brave, but I don't think I would be. Again, it's the same situation. The terrorists they're up front. In this case, this is probably another reason why it went differently. There were only 4, not 5. On every other plane, there had been 5. And what we think happened is that there was a 20th hijacker who came in through Orlando the month before. But this shining genius of a man, he was stopped by customs because he was only supposed to be there for 6 days. And yet he had no hotel reservation or a return ticket, and he had $2,800 in cash.
Whoa.
So the customs agent was like, yeah, you are obviously up to something. He thought, illegal immigration.
Right.
So he put that sucker on a flight to Dubai,
Oh, yep. So that's what happened to the final guy.
Yep. They don't name him. I'm sure that they can't legally. But anyway, Mohammed Atta, the guy who was basically the brains behind what, Al-Qaeda called the planes operation, he was waiting at the airport in Orlando that day. So we're pretty sure this is the 20th hijacker. Okay, so Zayad Jarrah, maybe, he was the probable pilot of this plane, but he had never flown a 757, which is what 93 was. He had only ever used the flight simulator. Not super great at this. Okay. So the first 3 flights took off within 21 minutes of each other. 93 is so much later. So what happens is, on the part of the FAA, there was some effort to let some planes know about the hijacks, but no one bothered to tell the in-flight planes. The ones who actually needed to know.
Jeez.
Melody Homer, who was the wife of one of the 93 pilots, saw the World Trade Center on fire and she freaked.
Right.
For obvious reasons. She got in touch with a receptionist at United, I think. I don't remember. And that receptionist said, 93 is fine. It's okay. I can actually send your husband a message. Because they had like a text messaging digital system.
Oh, okay.
And she's like, I can send him a message. She sent that message 3 times.
Oh, no.
No one answered.
Ugh.
So there was also Ed Ballinger. He was a United Airlines employee. He was kind of like a flight supervisor. It's sort of hard to explain what he did, but he wasn't like an FAA controller. He couldn't see them live, but he was in charge of like evaluating flight plans and safety and stuff like that. And he had been in charge of 175, and once that shit show happened. He was like, okay, I've got to warn the remaining flights I've got about the hijack possibility. He sent the message to 93 at 9:23. Yeah, at 9:25, 93 checked in with Cleveland. So at this point, they've gotten a bunch of messages on the ACAR system, the digital text message, that say, "Are you okay?" You know, and they've got this other message that says other planes have been hijacked, but apparently they have not seen them because at 9:25 they do check in with Cleveland FAA, and that's normal, but Cleveland says nothing to them about the other planes. So, yikes. At around 9:28, Flight 93 falls 680 feet. Yikes. A mayday is heard over the radio, and the pilot tells someone to get out. And one of the pilots had extreme presence of mind. They held down the radio so that the FAA would hear it. Mm-hmm. The FAA controller heard more screaming and tried to hail the plane, and then told his supervisor to tell DC FAA, the main people. That guy called United Chicago instead, for reasons I don't know.
The hell? Yeah.
A few minutes later, after the Mayday, Jara makes the same radio mistake as everyone else. He's broadcasting instead of... Right. Yeah. So he says, "We've got a bomb."
Ugh.
And then, this is rough. In every other plane, they never hear anyone speaking English, but they possibly held a flight attendant hostage in the cockpit for a while and then killed her. It's pretty rough. Some of it was caught on the black box. Yeah. And they think one of the pilots might have been alive for a while too. So it's the same thing over and over again. Around 9:36, Cleveland FAA finally notifies the DC FAA of the 93 hijack. And Cleveland is seriously like, actually, we'll call a local military base for help if you don't have the fighter jets up yet. Mm-hmm. And DC is like, actually, no, that's above your pay grade.
Wow.
And then they don't let the military know.
Oh my gosh.
The 93 passengers made approximately 37 airphone calls as well as 2 cell phone calls within a half hour. So they're calling friends, family, and anyone they could raise at United because, again, these are the numbers they know.
Right.
You know? Jeremy Glick, a passenger, told his wife that the passengers had taken a vote and decided to do something.
Oh.
Sandy Bradshaw, a flight attendant, called her husband and reported that people were loading up on hot water because they were going to resist. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming they were going to throw it. And that her husband was a pilot. So he told her, if you guys manage this, call me and I'll tell you how to fly the plane.
Oh my goodness.
So there was also a certified pilot on board. So they probably what their plan was we'll take this over and, you know, he'll fly and we'll call. And,
right,
you know.
Right.
Cece Lyle, who was another flight attendant and a certified badass. She was a former cop and she was like an expert in beating people up, basically.
An expert in beating people up.
I forget what it was called, but she had all these certifications, like, you know, for not combat, but like, you know, taking suspects down. So she was impressive. Cece Lyle told her husband, "We have a plan."
Okay.
So meanwhile, the military is keeping an eye on an entirely different plane because Boston FAA told them that was a possible hijack. And meanwhile, the FAA is literally evacuating airports in 93's path and not telling the military about the damn plane.
Jeez.
At 9:53, the hijackers figure out that something is up with the passengers, and they start speaking in Arabic about gathering all the hijackers into the cockpit and then defending it with a fire axe. And we know that they were headed for DC because they entered the Reagan, the code for Reagan into the flight computer.
Okay. For the autopilot.
And Bin Laden was apparently a fan of taking out the White House, but actually that's a really hard target to hit. So Mohammed Atta was like, the Capitol building is easier. Wow. Slightly before 10 o'clock, Todd Beamer, who was a passenger, he's the one who said, "Let's roll." That actually was a real thing.
Oh.
So they could only rush single file because of the seats.
Mm-hmm.
And they had 100 feet to go from the back of the plane to the cockpit. So this is rough. Jara tried rocking the plane and bringing it up and down to keep them off their toes, but it didn't work. We're pretty sure they turned the beverage cart into a battering ram for the cockpit drawer.
Wow.
Just, yeah, the black box, you can hear there's shouting, there's glass breaking, people are like fighting and not giving up. At 10 o'clock, the terrorists knew, they discussed crashing the plane because that was always the fallback. It was never, oh, we're going to land somewhere.
Right.
It was, we'll crash. And by 10:01, they know it's over. So they decide to crash into the ground. And on the black box, Jara tells one of the other terrorists to kill the oxygen so that he can do it. So that they're distracted. But the passengers and crew may have actually made it into the cockpit and grabbed the wheel because one of the terrorists screams, "Give it to me," 8 times. And the plane didn't go down normally. It was sideways and then upside down.
Whoa.
So somebody grabbed that wheel.
Right.
But unfortunately, at 10:03 a.m., it hit the ground at the old Diamond T coal strip mine near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, going 563 miles per hour.
Jeez.
It was only 15 minutes away from D.C. by air. And Cleveland FAA notified the military of the hijack at 10:07, 4 minutes later.
Ugh.
They didn't actually say the plane had crashed, although they'd already received eyewitness reports from a military cargo plane that there was fire on the ground. And the FAA were aware of the hijack for more than half an hour.
Wow.
To recap, the military had the following amount of notice about each plane before it hit its target. Flight 11, 8 minutes. Flight 175, 11 seconds. Flight 77, less than 4 minutes. And then Flight 93, they didn't hear about it until afterwards.
Jeez.
Yep.
They couldn't do anything.
Nope. That same day, the FAA and the military created a conference call that has been ongoing ever since. And that's entirely because of this bullshit.
All right.
Yeah, this is not acceptable.
No.
Like, it's just not. It's
No.
just, there's no reason for this.
They should have notified the military immediately.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of understand Flight 11. It was the first one, but the others get worse.
You know, kind of, but also not.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, you didn't notify any sort of law enforcement branch.
Yeah.
Like, what are you supposed to do as...
No, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
I don't know what they were thinking. I literally don't. It doesn't make sense to me.
It's just, the protocol for it makes no sense at
No.
all. If that's your protocol is terrible. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, your protocol is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to switch to 102 Minutes by Jim Dwyer and Kevin Flynn.
Okay.
And that is about the attacks. What happened between the first hit and the last fall. So their thesis of this book is basically that the hijackers they are not responsible. Well, okay. So the hijackers are ultimately responsible for what happened, obviously. But, to quote them, simply to declare that the hijackers alone killed all those people gives them far more credit as tacticians than they are due. The buildings themselves became weapons, apparently well beyond the designs of the hijackers, if not their hopes. So too did a sclerotic emergency culture in New York that resisted reform even when confronted again and again with the dangers of business as usual. So, Rudolph Giuliani, our esteemed president's esteemed lawyer.
Oh gosh, yeah, he is.
Was the mayor of New York City at this time. And there's a lot of ass covering afterwards because a lot of people who died did not need to die. And that includes the 200 firefighters who died in Tower 1. There was no reason why they should have died. There was just no reason. So, to understand what happened, you have to start with the 1993 attack, not, the 9/11 one.
So that took place on February 26, 1993, and basically what happened was, I believe it was a fertilizer bomb that just backed a yellow Ford Econoline into the basement of the World Trade Center.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like midday, and it blew up, and it killed 6 people who were nearby, and there were a bunch of car fires and a lot of tire smoke. The electricity and the backup went out, and there was no PA system, and that was really about it. Because what happened was they had attacked the strongest part of the building.
Right.
This part of the building, I think, actually may have had concrete walls that were like 3 feet thick.
Wow.
Just intense. They had to build it so that the Hudson River wouldn't come in, so it's like an insanely thick area of the building.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is that it gives people a real false sense of security. They're like, these buildings literally took a bomb, and it wasn't a problem. But what they don't understand is that the rest of the building is not built that way. Hi guys, this is Claire. So you've just finished the second part of our 3-part series on 9/11. If you'd like to keep going, you do not have to wait. The next episode is already up on our SoundCloud and should be available wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're a teacher, you can find my collection of 9/11 readings on our website, which is rudehistoryeducation.wordpress.com. Everyone else is welcome to visit us on the Rude History Facebook page. And if you've got any comments or suggested topics for the podcast, then you can email us at rudehistorypodcast@gmail.com. All right, see you in the next one.